Okay, picture this, a piece of high-tech medical-grade titanium. It's an engineering marvel, right? It's designed to be incredibly strong, to hold your bones together, and to basically give your body a helping hand to heal. But what happens when the thing that's supposed to be the strongest link breaks? Today we're getting into the fascinating and kind of scary story of why these critical medical implants sometimes fail.
So let's look at a real-life case. What you're seeing here is a reconstruction of a patient's jaw fracture. The surgeon went in, put in a titanium plate, and everything looked perfect. But just 3 months later, that same plate, the very thing that was supposed to guarantee stability, snaps. I mean, just look at it, clean in two. The immediate question is, how on earth does that happen?
So you're probably wondering, is this a common thing? Well, a study that looked at 238 of these exact procedures found that the plate broke in 2.52% of them. Now that translates to 6 patients. And yeah, 2.52% might not sound like a huge number, but for those 6 people, it's an absolute disaster. It means going back under the knife for an even tougher surgery and a much longer, harder recovery.
And that's really the key here. Even though it's rare, the consequences are so serious that we have to figure out why it's happening. This isn't just about a piece of metal failing. It's this complex puzzle that involves the surgeon's skill, what the patient does after surgery, and the actual design of the implant itself. So let's start digging in.
All right, first up, we've got to understand the physics of what's going on here. Why does a plate that's supposed to be a helper suddenly end up carrying a load it was never designed to handle?
This right here, this is the absolute heart of the matter. See, in a perfect surgery, the goal is what's called load sharing. The surgeon brings the 2 ends of the broken bone right up against each other. That way, the bone and the plate work as a team, sharing the stress. But if there's a gap between the bones, the plate is forced into a load-bearing situation. It has to take on all the stress, all by itself, and it's just not built for that. It's like trying to hold up a bridge with a piece of rebar. It's going to bend, fatigue, and eventually it's going to snap.
And this quote from the study really drives home how incredibly precise the surgery needs to be. To get that perfect load-sharing setup, the gap between the bones has to be practically invisible. We're talking hairline widths. The research found that a gap of just 1 or 2 millimeters, that's it, is enough to set that implant on a path to failure. The margin for error is tiny. So when we look at the cases where these plates actually broke, it really boils down to 3 main culprits. Number 1, the most common, is that wide fracture gap we just talked about, a slip-up in surgical technique. But number 2 is also huge, the patient. Chewing hard food too soon puts massive, repetitive stress cycles on that plate. And then you have the wild cards, unpredictable events. In one case, a patient had an epileptic seizure, and the forces generated were just way more than the implant could ever withstand.
So knowing the cause is one thing, but what actually happens when a plate breaks? Well, this is where the stakes get so much higher for the patient. A redo surgery is not just a simple do-over, it's a whole different ballgame. A second surgery is just incredibly difficult. First off, the surgeon has to carefully cut through all the dense, tough scar tissue that's formed since the first operation. Then they have to meticulously hunt down and remove every single tiny piece of the broken plate and all the original screws. To make matters worse, sometimes the bone itself has been damaged or lost, which means they have to perform a bone graft, taking bone from somewhere else in the patient's body, like the hip, just to rebuild the jaw. And here's why that's so terrifying. All that digging around through scar tissue puts vital things at risk, like the facial nerve. That's the nerve that controls your smile, your expressions. Damage that, and the consequences can be permanent. So we're not just talking about a mechanical problem anymore. This is a failure that can have truly life-altering effects. Okay, so if we can't guarantee a perfect surgery or perfect patient behavior 100% of the time, what's the solution? Well, it turns out the answer might be in the plate itself. This is where data science gives us a really powerful new tool to solve the problem. I want you to meet the mechanical excellence factor, or MEF. The best way to think about it is like a credit score, but for a medical implant. It analyzes all the different design features of a plate, its size, shape, number of holes, and spits out a single number that tells you how strong and reliable it's likely to be. It's a total game changer, turning implant design from a bit of an art into a hard science.
So what gives you a good MF score? It's actually pretty intuitive when you think about it. Bigger is better. Plates with a larger surface area and that are taller and wider are just plain stronger. More screws mean the load is distributed better. And interestingly, the data showed that simple, round screw holes create a much more rigid and stable system.
And on the flip side, what kills an MF score? Well, no surprise, smaller plates with fewer screws don't do well. But the study found one design feature was a real weak spot: oval-shaped holes. Now, surgeons sometimes like them because they offer a little wiggle room for placement, but from a pure mechanics standpoint, they create weak points in the plate, which is a big no-no.
And here's the most exciting part. With the MEF, we're no longer just guessing what makes a good implant design. We literally have a quantitative blueprint, a recipe, for engineering plates that are way more resistant to breaking right from the start.
This chart shows you everything. Some of the weaker, older designs scored around a 9 on the MF scale. The current gold standard that surgeons often use, it scores a pretty decent 17.8. But look at this. New plates designed specifically using these MF principles are scoring over 28. That's not just a little better, that is a massive leap forward in strength and reliability.
So what this all means is that engineers can now essentially work backwards. They can start with the goal of a super high MEF score and design a plate that hits that target. By focusing on the things we know work, the right dimensions, the right number of screws, the right hole shape, they can build implants that are just fundamentally tougher and much more forgiving of all the real-world stresses they're going to face.
Which leaves us with this incredible thought. We now have the data, we have the formula for building a stronger implant. If we can combine this brilliant new engineering with the best surgical techniques and better patient education, could we be on the verge of making these terrifying implant failures a thing of the past? It really feels like we're getting close.